All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a quick truth will set you free. I have got my longtime acquaintance and friend, Sean Harrington, that stepped up to the challenge to have a conversation about the post that I just did on my personal Facebook page yesterday. See what we can, see what middle ground we can find between the two of us. And I always give anybody that is willing to have a discussion with me in this format credit. With that said, I encourage you to share this. So if you guys want to see an actual live conversation with a lot of people that I know are just willing to post and slam and do things, and that's on the left and the right, we're going to have an actual conversation regarding the post that I will read in its entirety and then go one by one, because Sean said I had reasons and I have issues with a lot of the things that were in my personal post. There's been a lot of people that have thrown a lot of hate in that post. Sean, however, wanted to have a conversation. So I give him worlds and worlds of credit on that. So that means we're going to get started with this little quick version of Truth Will Set You Free right now. I know, Sean, that was a lot of hubbub for what seems to be very little. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Sean Harrington. What is that, Shanzi? Shanzi?
Yeah, Shanzi's a nickname I go by, so I just kind of threw that out there.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to read the post that got everybody hot and bothered, which I had a very specific purpose, and I wanted to see if anybody would reply in a way that I typically would reply to something on the other side, which I think is that middle ground of how to actually have awareness and conversation. Your reply was one of my favorites because it said, I disagree and I want to have a conversation. Boom, done with it. Always good. Great way to have it. So I'm going to really quick read it and then we'll go one by one. So I shared this from a friend, and I have to be honest, to me, this was a great description of everything that's going on in my head in a daily basis. I will always be a fan of constant communication and common grounds. But there's a rhetoric that has grown tough to hear. I still will push towards the concept of unity, but this is daunting, and I'd love to hear feedback from my friends across the aisle on how they feel about this. So this was the post that I shared, which I resonate with 97%. If Joe Biden won the election legally, I'm going to pray for Joe Biden and his party that God may grant them the wisdom to do the right thing for our country. However, here is my issue with the whole let us be the United States again that we have heard from Joe Biden. For the last 4 years, the Democrats have gone scorched earth. You have salted the fields, and now you want to grow crops. The problem is that 72 plus million of us have memories longer than a hamster. We remember the Women's March, vagina hats and all, the day after the inauguration, which to me was probably the one part that I could have left out of this for my post. We remember the 4 years of attacks and impeachments. We remember not our president and the resistance. We remember Maxine Waters telling followers to harass us in restaurants. We remember the president's spokesperson being kicked out of a restaurant. We remember hundreds of Trump supporters physically attacked. We remember Trump supporters getting doxxed and fired from jobs. We remember riots and looting. We remember a comedian holding up the president's severed head. We remember a play in Central Park with public funding showing the killing of President Trump. We remember Robert De Niro yelling F Trump at the Tonys and getting a standing ovation. We remember Nancy Pelosi tearing up the State of the Union address. We remember the total in the tank move on the part of the mainstream media. We remember the nonstop and live fact checking on our president and his supporters. We remember nonstop in-your-face lies and open cover-ups from the media. We remember the president and his staff being spied upon. We remember 5 senators shot at on a ball field. That was before Trump, I believe. We remember every so-called comedy show turned into nothing but Trump hate fest. That's all the night times and the SNLs and the evening, the Jimmy Fallons, which he's actually probably the best out of the group. We remember 95% negative coverage in the news. We remember the state governors asking and getting everything they asked for and then blaming Trump for their problems. We remember a Trump top aide verbally assaulted in 2 DC restaurants. We remember people banging on the Supreme Court doors. We remember that we were called every name in the book for us supporting President Trump. We remember that Hollywood said they would leave after Trump was elected, but then they stayed. The list is endless, but you get the idea. My friends will be my friends, but a party that has been on an attack for 4 long years does not get a free pass with me. And to summarize, these are my words at this point. It does get a pass with a good reason, and I don't have one as of yet. And that's what I was searching for in this post. So, Sean, are you a lifelong Democrat, or what's your political affiliation?
Not at all. I think that, like many people in the nation, I'm a registered independent.
Okay.
I consider myself, a liberal or a progressive, and I would like to see the DNC move towards that. Ultimately, I would love to see both parties split into 2 and have 4 parties and have, each kind of move the marker either way for people to more identify with.
Gotcha. And I'll be honest, in my opinion, I think you've probably seen this in posts. I was a Democrat my whole life. I went to art school. I still have incredibly liberal ideals in several ways. But the areas that matter to me the most on a voting perspective are conservative. And based on, interestingly, what you just said, part of the reason why I went from being a Trump voter to a Trump supporter is because I stopped playing the game of what the media is about him, and I started playing the what are his views, stance, and policies. And to me, he is actually his own third party. And these are the conversations I've started to have. And he really is not a Republican, certainly not a Democrat. So that is why I started to support him. So with that said,
and I get that. I also understand that he kind of changed a lot of his platform to pander to people. I mean, you look at what he said, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, they were more actually progressive ideas, but he just kind of pandered to get the farthest right votes he could, and kind of, to me, he's kind of destroying the Republican Party.
In what way do you, and I'm going to, before we get started, because the term he pandered, and to me, I rarely make name calling, but I do make the jokes of Joe Biden, Captain Panderpants, because to me, nobody panders more than Joe Biden.
He does it too. I mean, and honestly, Biden is a classic 80s Republican.
Very, very, very true, which is exactly what we're supposed to be trying to avoid as the modern progressive movement, minus take away AOC +3. But where has Trump pandered, out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, right off the bat with Build the Wall in his campaign, he was even, I don't know who said it, but they said that Trump has a problem with looking at the screen, watching the teleprompter. And they kind of told him, envision a wall, envision a wall back there. And he said, let's build a wall. And all of a sudden, a bunch of people started cheering. And then that became a huge part of his campaign, just because he realized he got a great response out of it.
So you and I know each other from the world of marketing. There's something very different about the terminology pandering and marketing. He made a statement. If he would have talked about building the wall and said, build the wall, we're going to build a wall, and then never done it and not given a shit because now he already got that far right group, that would be pandering. He built hundreds of miles of a wall.
No, he fixed hundreds of miles of wall. Built all of 3 miles.
Say that again?
Built all of 3 miles.
That is 100% incorrect, and I will ask you to fact check yourself on that. He improved, he reinforced, I believe, over 100 miles, but there is over 300 miles of new, over 200 and something miles of new wall. So what you are reading is a false statement, or what you have heard. I'll be honest, and we'll both look it up at one point after this call. Yeah. But I will tell you, because I've had this conversation before, we've pulled it up on a live show. That is an incorrect. Again, this pitch by the media, and this is again why I don't blame you, blame me. I hope you don't blame me for my opinions, but there has been this divide in the media based on how they provide information, and I think the fact that an educated person like you thinks that he's only built 3 fresh new miles of wall is scary. It's scary. So, all right, let's
talk about the post.
Let's talk about the post. I know, sorry. All right, so I know you took specific notes, so let's go into it. I'm going to go ahead. If Joe Biden, do you want to start all the way at the top? If Joe Biden won the election legally? Well,
one, I want to say that right there is a kind of a bait and switch kind of a thing where it's like, oh, legally, like it's kind of been proven he's won that legally. Like the fact that they're still looking at it is just ridiculous.
Have you seen the suitcases coming out from underneath the table? Have you seen the hours of testimony of eyewitnesses? Because I know
I just keep hearing about it, but I haven't seen any of it.
Because of the media that you watch does not play it when it
I
is.
don't watch much media. I try not to.
So this is being played live right now, and I think that there's a lot of people that literally look at people that think the election is completely over, which by rule of the Constitution, it's not over until December 14th. Period. There is no like debating that fact unless Trump were to concede. But with all the things that we are seeing on media outlets that are not played on mainstream, there is enormous amounts of people that are testifying, saying, I saw this wrong, saying, I saw these amount of votes come in at a certain time, saying it's so, and these are sworn, and I'm watching these live that are not being played by anybody but these right-wing outlets that I know turn people off because like, oh, it's right-wing. But live testimony in front of a court is live testimony in front of a court, period. And these are not the court cases being thrown out. That's to be very clear. So these are people giving their example of why there needs to be more investigation. Now there's video of these 4 gigantic suitcases with votes that are coming out from underneath the table in Georgia that's real, and they have to look at this. So for those that think the election is over, and again, I think that right now Biden is in a large lead. I'm not saying like Trump is the president of the United States. I'm saying the election is not over. So I think the fact that there is not enough information being brought to all ends of the spectrum and just shutting it down, which Project Veritas is showing what CNN does in their meetings, which makes it very, very clear on what they are going to air to the American public to make them believe a certain thing. So with that said, do you have any response to that, or would you like to move to the next point?
Next point would be great. I think it was the point about the impeachment, just how they hounded Trump, and they didn't actually bring impeachment proceedings until very late in the game anyway. It was just always kind of like a dangling threat. But the fact is that he should have been impeached for obstruction and for doing everything he did to make firing officials, telling FBI to investigate things that's not his position to do to any of those officials. They're a separate branch that shouldn't be beholden to him in the first place, and he can't be firing somebody to say you can't investigate me. Like, well, that's actually their job. And if you weren't so afraid of what they would find, you wouldn't be saying anything in the first place. Furthermore, when he did get impeached, the only reason he didn't get convicted was because of a House-led Senate, or a Republican-led Senate. I mean, he lost that by a vote. That's a pretty thin margin.
It's because it became such a partisan issue, which the person that presented the impeachment papers was Nancy Pelosi, who actually said, I would never try to impeach the president if it was a partisan issue, if we knew it was a partisan issue, because it'd be a waste of time and money, which is what it turned out to be. And in the end, after reading all the paperwork, it literally became we don't want him as our president anymore, because the actual evidence and proof was incredibly light. It was testimony based off of, well, the tone was, which I watched hours of that testimony. It seemed as though what he was hinting at, that's nothing that can hold up in a court of law. So the fact that it even passed the House is mortifying, in my opinion. But no, in terms of the impeachment, you're right. The impeachment hearings did not start until the final hour, till the, beginning of the third year. However, they're also finding all of these audio clips, and we already knew they've been talking about wanting to find a way to impeach him since day one. That's a fact. There's video clips of them saying we need to find a way to impeach Donald Trump. So they've been looking for reasons all the way throughout. And when he's talking about the FBI doesn't need to investigate it,
like, it's not that they need to find the reason. I feel like they needed to find a reason that would hold up, because they had many reasons to impeach him, with all the election shady stuff that was going on with his son and Russia. And I mean, whether it did or did not happen, the fact that they were always backpedaling, and there was it was never the smoking gun, and they always had some kind of excuse. And that's just one of the many things.
We have a potential incoming president, if Biden becomes president, that has far more ties directly to the same organizations proven, and audio clips of him even saying that he used his political weight to make sure that a prosecutor in Ukraine was fired, and he was bragging about it. We have actual audio of him doing something much far clearer than Donald Trump ever did. And for some odd reason, we're not even bringing that up. Is Trump perfect? No, I don't think any president has ever done everything to the letter, and which will then bring up possibly your thought process on all the indictments. People go, well, look at all the indictments around Donald Trump and all these people. It's because
more than any other administration combined.
Because he was the most heavily investigated administration in history by 50-fold, because they've been looking for a way to get him out, as they have said.
Well, the next ones are, Reagan and then Nixon. They're pretty high up on that list with indictments and convictions. And then also, sure, investigation after investigation, but you still have how many convictions? Much more than any other president. Well, I believe Nixon.
In the political world, if you dig up enough indictments, you're going to find a lot of convictions. I guarantee you. And whatever, I shouldn't say guarantee, because that's verbiage that I don't like to use. Sure. I would bet on that if any presidential cabinet and the people working around him were ever investigated the exact same way, the same amount of convictions would happen, because politics is a dirty game, and it always has been. So if you can find stuff that's breaking the law, they're going to arrest it. Problem is, there's never been that kind of political pressure and weight to go after one person. So,
all right.
Next spot.
Let's we can probably rapid fire the rest of them if you like.
Okay. All right. So we remember Not Our President and the Resistance.
I feel like that's a hypocritical thing, because either side, whatever side comes in, they're going to be against that person. So you're going to have Republicans so against Biden. You had so many people so against Obama, you wouldn't even believe. I knew you do believe it, but but with this instance, Trump is just such a reprehensible person, and a liar and a cheat, and that I think it was a little bit more founded with what that administration has been doing. Like, moving on to the next thing about Maxine Waters bringing that up, that was very uncouth of her to say something, but how does something happen and change if you don't actually talk and hound your officials? And that was the other thing about the whole post, was it never kind of highlights or shows what the reason that they mentioned. They mentioned Maxine Waters, they mentioned Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but what is the underlying issue on each mention? The mention with Maxine Waters was kids in cages. Having that administration have their policy was to separate kids and parents. That policy wasn't a policy of something in a previous administration, unless very separate instances where maybe a father was a convict, so they would keep the child with the mother. Very didn't happen often. Whereas now in this that administration, it happened all the time.
Got it. So it happened for 2 weeks. Liars and cheats, I want to go back to, but I'll go to the cages. First off, they're not like...
That was the Maxine Waters reference.
Right, I know that. So that was during... that was a two-week spat of something that was actually done during the Obama era. They weren't little tiny cages that people talked about. They were just caged rooms, essentially. And I get the purpose. I also get how people could be offended by it, because at the time we had an influx of people trying to immigrate illegally to the country, because during President Obama, there was 11 million deportations, which was the most in history. So what's the cause and effect? People are going to start wanting to come back. And with our border being insanely flooded, he was trying to create, and improperly so, most likely, a threat to people, saying, well, you know what? You're breaking the law. So now you're illegal citizen, and
you have many people coming here legally to ask for amnesty. That's a legal way to enter this country, and they're still put in a cage.
No, not the way they were doing it. That is also incorrect. It was actually done by strictly those crossing the border illegally. The people, and it's our immigration system is broken. It has been for decades. But the way to get amnesty is not to just cross over the Brazos River or whatever it is and say, hey, I'm here for amnesty.
I'm not talking even about those people. I'm talking about people who actually went to a checkpoint. They still went into a holding facility.
What are you going to do? Just let them in?
The thing is like there's people who've been there for either some of those, how awful some of those countries that they're fleeing is.
Absolutely.
The threat of, like, they say MS-13s crossing the border, like, we have thousands and thousands of gang members coming in. No, it's actually, we have thousands and thousands of people fleeing MS-13 gang members in other places in other countries.
Very
and
true.
they've already, they've watched, family members die in horrific ways, and they're here to. And why shouldn't they be? This is a country that should be accepting people. I lived in Minneapolis and St. Paul for 15 years, and that whole city, you have a whole Somali community of people who fled a war.
I get it. No, I agree with you, and I think that when people are fleeing, and ironically enough, just to give you a quick teaser about Joe Biden in the 1970s, after the Vietnam War, he actually shut down the Vietnam people from the exact same refugees that they needed to be. And there's about 1.3 million people that faced almost imminent genocide after the Vietnam War. And Joe Biden was the spearhead in making sure that immigration didn't happen. Let's go back to the current. And I will tell you that is the reason why we have holding cells, is because we don't know who is MS-13. And it takes very long. But again, cause and effect, when Obama has deported so many people, maybe rightfully so. I mean, I'm against illegal immigration, so I get what he was doing, but it causes this, and it's a crisis. Even I think Trump even called it a humanitarian crisis, and we had too many people coming. So you just can't go, well, looks like they're not MS-13, let's bring them in. You have to have these holding cells, which are getting overrun and they're getting overridden, and they're doing the best they can. So one of the things that he employed was that he would say, we're separating kids from cages. And at the time, some of it was parents, some of it was also illegal smuggling of children and different effed up things as well. There was a whole bowl of issues that they were trying to separate. His family, Ivanka and the kids, and everybody said, this is not working, this is a bad idea. And they stopped after 2 weeks. They were trying to do something. And eventually the winter came, and then there was less people crossing the border, and they were able to get a slightly better handle on the situation. So in terms of that is the actual, I mean, again, I don't think it was perfect. I don't think it was good, but you can't, your reason is exactly why there's holding cells, is you have to see who is bad, who is there for amnesty, who's doing these different things. And when it's at such an influx that our country you've got Democratic leaders yelling to abolish ICE and abolish Border Patrol, nobody can handle it then. So you've got one side of the political spectrum getting furious at it, and that's the side that needs to actually be helping the people coming across. Otherwise, you have an open door policy. Next point.
Sure.
All right. Let's see. Okay. I kind of want to go back to the liar and the cheat, but I know that's a common rhetoric that I heard all day today. And I no, there's a lot of not points. We can come back to that one.
I mean, how many falsehoods has he said? Was it like 20,000 in his campaign or something like that? During his presidency?
So those 20,000 are very interesting, because
there's a gray area. I understand there's, inaccuracy versus outright lie.
Yeah. And none of I have yet to find a concrete, blatant, bold-faced lie that in that list of things.
I'm a billionaire.
What's that?
I'm a billionaire.
He is a billionaire.
I think that's the biggest lie he ever told the country.
But that could be an exaggeration. I mean, technically, in the world of real estate, depending on what your holdings are on any given week and valuation, I mean, look at how much things change with shit. Zuckerberg has changed his valuation by 30 billion in 5 months, and the greatest transfer of wealth in fucking history. Same with Walmart. Same with Amazon. So you look at all this transfer of wealth. People's wealth can change. Like if all of a sudden Trump's stuff is valued at over $3 billion, it could very quickly be 900 million. So I don't think that's a blatant lie. I think it's true depending on the month. So that's what's considered a lie by a lot of places. I understand that. But a lot of the things are like, he lied about how many people were at his inauguration. Those are the little things that are considered lies, when really it's like, do we give a shit if it's 700,000 or 840,000? So to me, those are fibs or exaggerations or things that don't flat out matter to the American public, that are not blatant lies and cheats. So now you say cheat. How did he cheat?
In general, as a business person, not necessarily as a politician, just the way he does business, how many people he has refused to pay or he sues. There's so many contractors out there that were, had a contract with him, and at the end of the job that they had for him, be it one of his towers or his golf clubs or whatever, he never paid him. That's a cheat right there.
It happened on a handful of situations. That is very, very true. It's ultimately the way.
I also think that in general, that's the kind of businessman he is.
So I can provide
kind of like Bill Belichick. If you're not cheating to win, if you're not winning,
and you're not cheating.
You know what I'm saying.
I don't agree with that kind of business. However, I don't know what that scale of business is like when you are looking at doing hundreds of millions worth of projects. And sometimes in the world of bankruptcies, there's different filings, there's different options. And sometimes the people that are the most mad to talk about how he treated them poorly could also be the people that didn't do their job. So we don't really know. What I do know is I know two people that have worked with him from a very low level. They were might as well be a few steps ahead of the janitor, and they worked with him at Mar-a-Lago, and they worked with him, actually three people, and they worked with him at an event where they did something. The Mar-a-Lago guy was with him for 6 months. He goes, I've never seen somebody that knew everybody's name that worked for him, including janitors, including people that worked the hall. He was the most decent human being, and he goes, nobody believes me anymore because they see what the media portrayal of him is now. And with that, if it's considered cheating, we don't really know the backstory. We also don't know about the taxes, which might I add have been found to be a lie that was brought out by the media, found information because he paid taxes in a different way, because we don't understand that level of big business. So I think that is not that. I mean, that is, I get your point on why you feel that way, but I think that there's a much bigger picture we don't look at, including his real estate holdings that, unfortunately, they talk about in the 1980s that he had all these lawsuits against him.
Isn't it also still a violation of the emoluments clause?
Say that again.
The emoluments clause.
What is that clause? I actually don't know.
Having the one that says, when you become president, that you give up any kind of financial holdings you have, or anything that would be a conflict of interest to your presidency.
Very true, and that's right. That is yes. What has he done? Is he still operating his business?
He still has stake in if it's not him operating it, he still has money coming from it. Maybe passed on the operation duties to his sons, but he's still making money, and he's sending, Secret Service whenever they stay there. He's hosting dignitaries in Trump hotels in DC.
So those
are like a very clear and case in point kind of things.
So that is deemed by the media, and then that is the speaking point from it, that he is breaking that clause. And now I know what that is. I didn't know what it was called at the time. However, what would you expect somebody that's worth around $1 billion to do?
Not be a billionaire where they're a sitting president. I mean, maybe if you have your money in your bank, if you actually have that money, it wouldn't be a big deal, but you shouldn't be having any kind of operation of business while you are a sitting president, because that's not your job anymore. Your job is
he's not conducting any of the business. And the few times that they've stated,
but he's directing people to
so that's
enrich that business.
He saved the government hundreds of thousands of dollars on those instances because he provided a discounted rate through his family, who is still running the hotel. So I get what you're saying. At the same time, a billionaire can't just. We elected, unfortunately for some people, we elected somebody that was worth in holdings $1 billion. You can't expect them to liquidate everything and have it sit in a bank for 4 years. So he did what he could to distance himself from his business. And I will tell you, I do not believe that he is in any way, shape, or form conducted business on his own company dime. I think there's times that he's directed people to his hotels. So again, not a cheat, and he saved the American taxpayer money. I couldn't give a shit, personally. All right, let's see. So this one is important to me, so I want to get into this. Trump supporters getting doxxed and fired from jobs, and rioting and looting. What's your opinion on that?
So I think those are two separate things, but I'll cover both of them, especially the rioting and looting one. The doxxed thing, I believe many of the people who were doxxed that you may be referencing. Also, I will say that I think there's a difference between a Trump supporter and a Trumper. But that's just vernacular. The people who were doxxed that I understand were people who went to rallies with torches, yelling, "Jews will not replace us."
Nope.
So
I've been doxxed personally.
Okay.
And I know a lot of other people that have been doxxed, females, black people, all of them that are Trump supporters that have been doxxed over and over and over again, especially in the last 4 months. I've been told that there's certain jobs I'm no longer fit for having a conservative opinion.
Well, I will say that it is unfortunate, this kind of cancel culture that we have had come up. You look at somebody like I'm a huge Star Wars fan, Gina. I forget her last name. The gal who plays, in Mandalorian. She's been kind of brought to the media attention how Disney needs to cancel her, get her off the show because of what she made a dumb joke, but she said didn't feel like she wanted to be pressed into a viewpoint that she didn't believe in, which was about transgendered support. You don't have to be just because you don't support it. And I mean I do support all sorts of ways of life. You do you, but she was basically complaining that she was being pressed into that and didn't want to have to acquiesce. And that's the reason she gets canceled. And then another one was she was bringing up, I believe it was the election fraud or something like that just recently. And so a lot of other people, again, they went doubled down and attacked her again. And it's like, somebody has a right to their opinion, and I can disagree with it. But she didn't say anything hateful or wrong in my mind. I mean, I disagree with it. I think it's dumb, but doesn't mean she needs to lose her job because of it.
Exactly. And this is ultimately, I will be honest, the reason why this was the most important part of this post, because it's the other stuff I see and the other stuff bothers me. And there's a couple other things I have exact personal experience with, but the doxing is real. Like, I mean, I've had friends from childhood tell me, say you should never get a job again. And I hope you never do. And I hope I can share these messages. And I hope that I can show that all these different things why you're no longer fit to do what you do. And that is the definition of doxing. And then there's other people that report other people. And now there's even laws being put in place for charities that are finding ways of saying, like, if you see racism, report that person, which I think in the top of the mind, great idea. That's a great idea. Problem is, I've been in a lot of disagreements with people that will change their story just to make it a he said, she said. And that becomes a very dangerous world. It becomes McCarthyism. So this was why it was important, because I'm going through certain things. And I know a lot of the people that follow this page, my page, go through the same thing. And it's like all I've taught people this whole last several months is when you're having the conversation, when somebody says Black Lives Matter, don't say all lives matter, because you need to meet people where they are. You need to have empathy and hear what's going on, whether it's they see something, and then maybe have a conversation with facts after you've lent an ear and listened. So my point to bring up all the things on here was to listen to what I'm going through, meet me with empathy, and then maybe provide the facts back why you feel differently. And I received that from no one except for about 2 people, and your willingness to have a conversation. And that to me is why this is why it's being blatant. And my personal page is very split 50-50 between liberals and Democrats. It's not an echo chamber. Right. And it's proving my sadness. It's proving my issue. It's proving why people are right now more angry with the left's version of this portrayal of it's time to move on. And I mean, we haven't even had 2 weeks when the other side hasn't moved on yet from the last election. And honestly, I love the way you're talking, but you're still bringing up but he did cheat, he did lie, he did do all these different things, when it's still all alleged stuff that was never proved. And if we could actually give him some carte blanche to be president, which we never did, I don't think we got to see anything. And fact is, and again, as you brought up the election, people getting mad about the election fraud because 90% of the media is portraying it in one direction. It makes people empowered to say you're fucking wrong. And it's like, no, that's not you. Technically, if you're looking at right and wrong, the people that are saying the election is not over are actually the ones that are factually correct based on the rule of our country.
Yeah, I understand that. But also, I feel like this election is not even as nearly as contested as the last one. And that one.
How so?
Well, it's not as close. And honestly, to me, we shouldn't have such a divide where 3 million to 5 million votes in the entire nation decides everything. That seems like a slim margin to me.
That's the election. That's the American process. It always has been. And again, the popular vote, as we know, went to Hillary, yet the Electoral College was vastly in favor of Donald Trump last time. And people were going, well, we're the majority, so that's why we should stand up. And that was literally their excuse. And unfortunately, we run based on a system of an Electoral College. And although it seems like a landslide, based on the
like I said, it's pretty close. Like 5 million is not a landslide at all, really.
6 million is a lot, and in a lot of ways. But if you look at the Electoral College, the three states that are the most in question, 5 technically, are enough to completely change the Electoral College. So it is close enough. And as you said, yeah, it is. Maybe it's too close. But I think that shows where we are as a country. And I think it's even more interesting that it's that close when the people that voted for Donald Trump are part of the 10% of media. So they have been having to figure things out, share information on their own, and come up with a conclusion that goes above and beyond the perceived, oh, it's because you're racist.
Okay, so to kind of go right back to doxing, but only briefly in the sense to pivot to the rioting. I lived in St. Paul for 15 years. I was there when George Floyd lost his life. I was working in Wisconsin that night. And I remember it being completely ridiculously busy because people couldn't go back across the river. At this time, the bars and restaurants were still closed in Minneapolis, but they were open in Wisconsin. So you had so many people from the Twin Cities come to Wisconsin just to go out. And I couldn't go back into town. I had to get a hotel because the freeway was closed on the way in. When I finally did get back in a couple days later, I met with a friend, and we were outside having a drink, social distancing, because that was still a big thing at the time. And he goes, "I don't know how to feel, man." He's like, he lives about a mile from the 3rd precinct. He goes, "Buildings are on fire." And I'm like, good, that's how things change. It's a really horrible way to think about it, but riots are the voice of the people. On top of that, you see the protests versus rioters. We come to find out later on that many of those people who were actually vandalizing and starting fires, a lot of people from suburbs, a lot of white angry people, like there was 17 and 19, 21-year-olds who, like from Rosemont or Anoka or way the heck outside of the people who actually lived in that neighborhood who were actual protesters. So, and then you look at Seattle and what's happening there. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, Seattle's a mess, the whole town." No, it's 4 blocks. It's basically in a zone now. And you have all those cops over there and federal agents too now, but they have given the go-ahead by their union to actually cover their badges. So with doxing, I mean, this is a very scary thing because you can't even dox those guys because they're actually out there. These riots, you keep calling them, they're not really, they're police riots. The police start these riots. I mean, almost every kind of instance you've seen that movie, Chicago 7, that's, you create a force, a menacing force, and you keep pushing at people, something's going to crack. And that's a kind of a way to flip the narrative. They do that on purpose. They've had, this has been going back to like 1920s and 30s, but in Seattle, they had provocateurs, agent provocateurs. It was a real thing. It's historically accurate where they actually had, cops out of plain clothes go find the protesters and then go, break something and make it look like now all of a sudden these are bad people. They aren't protesting what we're actually doing wrong.
In the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah, in Seattle.
Yeah. Is that happening now? I might have missed that.
Yeah, you look at the cops right now, it's throwing tear gas, they're shooting bullets instead of at the ground like they're supposed to, rubber bullets straight at people's heads. That's the kind of stuff that makes the situation worse. You have a peaceful protest, and you have cops there with tear gas, and all of a sudden you don't have a peaceful protest.
Did you go to any of the peaceful protests that turned at night?
No, I avoid those kind of things. I don't want to be there when, like, the same thing, Trump came to town. You had a Trump rally and you had a protest against it, and I had friends who went there to protest. I fully, I'm on their viewpoint, but I'm not somebody who's going to go down there because I don't want to be involved if something does happen. You had somebody drive out of that building and people blocked their car and they pulled a gun,
So I want to start from the beginning what you said. So the concept of rioting is a voice for those of the unheard, and that's a Martin Luther King saying. However, he also was very, very against that at the same time. Very against rioting.
Against it. I'm against it, but it's like, at some point you look at the French Revolution and a Civil War, or not the Civil War, our own revolution.
What's the general purpose? So George Floyd was murdered, or he was killed, whatever, however you want to look at it. It was a bad situation. That cop was horrible. He was everything he did was wrong. It was against the book, and it was bad. What would be the purposes of these riots or creating change? And then I want to go into the whole concept of police starting the riots. But first, what was the change that needed to be created by burning down a building, and how is that effective?
Which building? The third precinct?
Let's go with Kenosha, third precinct. Anything that got burnt down by rioters. They were quote unquote peaceful protests.
I don't think those were protesters. Those were people who came in to make that worse. You have people who come into town. You have boogaloos. You know, like they could be far or right or left people.
That is very alleged. There was 2 people in Minnesota that have been actually, one convicted and one is on trial as a boogaloo. That was one of the people that threw a Molotov cocktail. So that's one out of all the billions of dollars of damage that you're speaking of. Again,
yeah, and once you get one thing going, and you know, you can incite a crowd. You know, like one person breaks a window, you see somebody else next to them. Hey, this is probably the right move right now. Whereas before it wasn't. So, you know, like it just takes a match, you know, and it's already a pool of gasoline.
I said that from the very beginning. And I said, you know, that the concept of peaceful protest is all well and good. Problem is right now, and this is why the police were doing what they were doing to try to stop it. I cannot in good conscience think that this is a police started riot. When now it is a matchstick type situation. A match started the riot. And often that is the far left BLM protesters or the Antifa, which again, the current potential president believes is a thought and not a real thing. Because you're actually stating the opposite. You're saying it was these foreign actors came in, and that would be what we would consider Antifa or the militant Black Lives Matter side. They were, and I used to say, the problem is there's 2,000 peaceful protesters. However, and out of those, 200, 300 become non-peaceful because of about 20. And it starts that match and it starts whatever. And at that point, the police have to do whatever the fuck they can to calm it down. And
I feel like at that point, if it does, and it has gotten to that point, the police aren't really well trained and equipped to do that. I feel like each time the police in general, we have a militarized police force.
I know who would be able to do that.
I feel like we actually did have Army Guard come in, you know, Minneapolis, and they have such a response where they will let things happen and not as long as somebody's not getting hurt. They can push back. You're not going to get past that wall. But they don't go ahead and start throwing tear gas and you know, rubber ammunition at people. That's not their.
They actually do. That is part of what they do, but they do it in a much more tactical way because that is what their job is and that is what they're good at. And the fact is, Donald Trump tried to do that to several cities like Seattle that would not let him. It would not let him because it's still a state law. So it's still the state rule. They're allowed to do whatever. And they were saying that they would prefer the police to be continuously out there, continuously ridiculed, yelled at, put in harm's way, and not bring in the people you just suggested to bring in. I agree with you. They should have been brought in and they weren't allowed to be by the state.
The other thing about the police is that they don't also have accountability, really. What is your thoughts and opinions about the police unions in general? There's not many unions left in this nation except for, you know, police and a few other things like that. But really, it creates such a cover for whatever they do. You have 4,000 complaints in a year, and they have 12 responses. Actual disciplinary actions to any kind of cop.
We're talking about Derek Chauvin, the fact that
not just. I mean,
because ultimately the police unions right now are the only thing keeping people on the police force. Otherwise, we would have mass chaos, and the whole defund the police movement wouldn't need it, and wouldn't even need to be around because everybody would be quitting. Which right now there's already a mass influx of people considering quitting. Good cops quitting the police force. With that said, God, you said something. You were talking about unions. That is. So our country is still completely run by unions. There is a union for everything. So that's a non-factual statement, whether it go from teaching to local teaching to police to store workers union to United Ad Workers Union to manufacturers to the auto workers. There is more unions in this country than we know what to do with. So that has not changed. We didn't get rid of unions anywhere. Some states have made right to work states, but unions are still a huge deal. Now, as for the police union, right now, I think they're incredibly important. I think this is one of those rare times that I think unions are important. Now, have they made drastic mistakes in the past on certain things? Absolutely. It goes without saying, there's certain police officers that have been pushed forward, pushed on, and they probably should have been pushed out. And I get that. Tamir Rice to me is a blatant example of a cop that was rehired for no apparent reason. He should have never been a police officer. But with that said, the police are doing what they can to protect an area, which is their job, and to not die when they go home. There's been cops killed. There's been cops on duty killed. There's been cops off duty killed. And I think you've worked spring break a year or two. I can't remember if you've been down there, but there's nothing more dangerous than a flying projectile. And we've got cops trying to do their job and protect monuments, protect places of work, while getting loaded beer cans, loaded water bottles chucked at them from hundreds of feet away, which is dangerous. So at that point, they're being ridiculously patient to not start the riots. Those were not riots started by police officers.
I believe their presence and their militarized equipment starts those riots.
No, criminals start those riots. So you cannot blame presence of police to start a riot. That is the most you've said a lot of intelligent things on this. That's the most asinine thing you've said. The presence of police is why there was a riot.
I said their militarized presence, actually.
Okay, their militarized presence. So you're saying them being there is not the reason.
It's the way they come in with riot gear. You know, like they have. I watched in Minneapolis. I watched people on the side of the highway. They're not on the highway. They're not blocking traffic. They're just there. And I watched a cop SUV go by just with those giant industrial spray cans, just spray the entire crowd, and then just drive off. What's the fucking point of that?
Why are they out on a highway?
They're on the exit ramps. Like I said, they're not blocking any traffic.
What are they planning on doing? Blocking the highway. So that's called when you jump ahead of what could be a bad situation. Did they shoot anybody? No, we're not in Tijuana. Like, they're doing things to prevent what could be a much worse situation.
Well, how about this? Why is it legal for them to use tear gas on their own population when it's illegal for any country to use on another country? It's considered a freaking war crime. And why is it our cops can use it in our population?
They were using, so again, this is a media point. They were using not tear gas. Tear gas is different than like mace, pepper spray, etc. They were using accelerants like that would irritate. Tear gas is actually like sarin or different things like that. We did not use sarin. We did not use military grade tear gas on our people. But again, because the media and a bunch of 27-year-old millennial journalists don't know terminology, they go, oh my God, they're getting sprayed with tear gas. And it became a thing. There was no tear gas. There was pepper spray. There was a police approved spray that is what they use in those instances. It's incredibly different. And again, misrepresented by the media. Okay. Shall we continue? We're almost done.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see, Robert. Let's see.
I will say that the Kathy Griffin thing. Yeah, she definitely stepped in it on that one. That was horrible, poor taste. She definitely apologized for it. It was very stupid.
Her apology was pretty shitty. Like, her apology.
Well, I also don't think she's not much. I mean, she's kind of a shitty person in general. But that was dumb. I mean, why would you even do that in the first place?
All right. So a lot of these we've actually kind of covered as we've been talking throughout anyway.
Oh, the fact checking. I think we did kind of check that, but I was going to say that they should be the fact that they have to fact check him and say that that's a false thing. That's kind of proven the point that how much he actually says untrue things on tweets and media.
So what's interesting about our fact checks, and this is what I talk about all the time, is so what the fact checks do is they instantly say true or false, which, by the way, they actually don't really have a fact check on his taxes, which I find hilarious because they can't even bring themselves to say it was false. They just literally avoid it. But the instant fact checking, the way they come up with the information is there is typically a long story behind it. I love reading the fact checks, not because of the true or false, but because of the syntax underneath it, where they actually properly explain that technically they're true, might actually be false. And technically they're false might actually be true. So the fact checkers have become so ridiculously politically motivated. And the constant fact checking is talking about somebody that is speaking typically for an hour and a half at a time, sans teleprompter for the most part, and they're fact checking itty bitty details. So if you've ever actually looked at some of the
take a lot of context out, I get it.
they're not even real fat. Like when they say, and then they go, he told 72 lies during this presentation, when literally they're including things like, when I looked to this governor from help last week, it could have been 2 weeks ago, and they will include that as a falsity. So it's like, they're really not a lot of false. There's not a lot in there that really holds weight. And it's just a pain to just go, you know what, at the end, how about they tell us what really is false? Like, did he ever say something like incredibly incorrect? No, because they're going to be blanketed by the 47 other things that they're finding that are literally like slightly off by 100, by 22. Like, it's, to me, ridiculous. But we've already kind of talked about that. Top aide verbally assaulted in DC restaurants. There was even Democrats that were assaulted after the
top aide. Are they talking about Sarah Huckabee at that Red Hen?
I believe there was Sarah Huckabee, but I mean, I'm just going to include in this, you're talking about Senator Paul Ryan, that literally just wrote the Justice for Breonna Taylor bill right before he got accosted in the street. And then the Democrat senator from, I can't remember what state, that decided to become a Trump supporter because he saw the importance in his own mind of this country. As a black man with his black wife getting accosted by a bunch of white Black Lives Matter supporters in the middle of the street, where they had to have police escort them to their car in downtown, which again, this goes back to Maxine Waters and people like her that are telling people, and not just Maxine, telling people to harass government officials and harass people that have difference in opinion on level of politics. Again, I get it. You go up to political people and you say that.
One thing that's so hypocritical about that.
Go ahead. What?
It's so hypocritical that they're saying, oh, the DNC did this, Maxine Waters did this. What about Trump saying, what about Michigan and like telling people to, maybe take out the government there or whatever, like stand ready. Look what happened. You had 13 people who were arrested with a plot to try to kidnap the governor in Michigan. The kind of rhetoric he uses incites those kind of wackos out there. And yeah, sure, there's wackos on either side.
That was a great wacko. Did you ever actually hear about most of the people out of those 13 with their social media profiles showed? They hated Trump too. They hated government. They were just nutsos.
There's those kind of wackos that's talking about those. There's like the boogalers. A lot of times you have people in those groups who fit on either side of the spectrum.
I get it.
Still have people telling them to go ahead and do something about it.
This is the outlier conversation, and I totally understand that, but his rhetoric doesn't present that. Like, he legit said, well, his comment with the Proud Boys was very interesting, and I was like, well, it's questionable when he's like stand by or whatever. I was like, that's wasn't one of my favorite things that he's ever said. But at the same time, I
could see that being construed another way, like as in stand aside.
Stand aside, yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. But when it comes down to these, there has never been, I have yet in the last decade hear a Republican official saying there's a huge difference between attack them where they are or stand up for yourself. Trump has been saying to stand up for yourself, speak for yourself. If you disagree with the government, like he's literally saying things like, this is where we protest. This is where we rise up and we speak. Whereas the other side is literally saying, attack them where they are. That's two very different statements in our country.
Was it literally attack? Was that the actual verbatim?
I believe as though it was, you yell at them, you make them feel uncomfortable, you find them where they are, and you make them feel uncomfortable, and you yell at them like that. That was it. And it has been said by multiple Democratic officials to do that. Like, there's a difference. And honestly, if they would have been like, I don't believe what Trump is saying, we need to stand up for our rights, do not be silent, speak your mind, I would have been like, cool, that is 100% your freedom to speak. And you even said that it's part of being an American is to riot earlier. And ultimately, the idea, and that is a CNN speaking point.
I don't know if I said that, but I will say part of an American is to actually, stand up to our elected officials and try to hold them accountable. If you have something that they are doing that you disagree with, it's more not even a right. It's you should be going up and saying this is wrong, and this is not why I elected you. Of course, everything else beyond talking to them in that kind of manner is not really acceptable. But I mean, I've done small things in the tip credit movement in the Twin Cities area, and I've talked to the mayor and other council members, and told them my displeasure and what they do and misrepresent us in a sense. So it's like I've been there where I've come upon them and said, I don't agree with what you're doing in your office.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean,
that's the proper way to do it. But accosting people at a restaurant, it also lets people, and again, we've seen it with a lot of Black Lives Matter peaceful protests that are still not a part of that 7%, where they go into restaurants and they are yelling at people at their tables and make like those are the ones that weren't even considered violent. And these are not far left activists. These are not the Antifas. These are just asshole Black Lives Matter pods, because there are some decent groups out there that are actually trying to create change. They're going and they're attacking people. And how would that be motivated? Trump has been said, stand up for yourself, speak out. And then the left has been continuously saying, if you don't believe what they're saying, attack them. Say what you want, yell at them in their place. Don't make them come like that. That is a rhetoric that actually is creating the world that we are in. Yet for some odd reason, people are blaming it on Trump when he says, stand up for yourself, speak up.
I also feel like just because there's the same instance on the other side. You have asshole Trump supporters doing obnoxious things to people who are like, somebody might carry a Black Lives Matter sign in like super white Oklahoma or something like that, and have people passing by every like a bunch of white people yelling obscenities at them and telling them to go fuck home, like, and all sorts of things. So just because you see all this stuff on the left here, doesn't mean you also have so much horrible stuff on the right.
100% agree that. However, at the same time that we're in 2020 and there's video of everything that happens in this world. And I've seen 2 videos of that. And I've seen a couple people tell me that like, oh, they were with a march and like a bunch of white people came by and said, fuck you, go Donald Trump. Whereas there is hundreds of hours of video the other direction of people ripping off Trump hats, damaging signs, stealing signs out of their houses. Like, yes, it happens on both sides.
I feel like that's also an exaggeration where you just because, or kind of what your point said, how your media frame lens that you see, because I've seen hundreds of videos the other way as well. So you're saying you see 2 and then 100. I'm seeing the opposite. So that could be just in a sense of the what people consume. A lot of it is a Facebook problem. The algorithm works.
I get I've seen the social dilemma. I understand what you're saying. My personal page is not a echo chamber, and I've had a similar conversation to this. And I said, cool, whenever you get me these videos, please send them to me. I'm sorry, Sean, you've not seen 100 videos. This is the first time I'm going to flat out say that I would love for you to tell me all these hateful videos that you have seen and gone with, because I have looked, I have asked for them from people. They don't exist. Do they exist in small number? Yes. Do they exist in drastically larger number on the opposite side? I will stand by that to my dying day now.
Even just national media, the Jews will not replace us. That's not hateful.
Where's that?
Charlottesville.
Okay, Charlottesville was, if I'm not mistaken, was that before Donald Trump or was that 2017?
I want to say it was during the campaign for Donald Trump. It might be 2016.
Okay, that was during the campaign. So again, that was a KKK situation. But what does that have to do with this election cycle and Trump supporters? And that's not a Trump supporter. Those are asshole KKK. You're bringing up an unrelated story.
They were wearing MAGA hats.
Were they wearing MAGA hats? Okay, so that's wrong. So those are KKK assholes. So that was a big media politicized event, which unfortunately they politicized it for the wrong reason, because all they do is they play the clip of Trump saying there was very good people on both sides, which is incredibly inaccurate of exactly his speech that happened when he literally denounced neo-Nazis and KKKs right before he said that. So again, so that was one event that also is in our country in the history books as one of the worst events that have happened in the last 5 years. But also a lot of it is very similar to what happens at the 7% of Black Lives Matter protests that have gone violent in the last several months.
I know, and it's just there's not so little and so few, or so many on each. Yeah, I feel like there's an equal amount on both sides, or a similar amount. There's you got the gun-toting rejects up in Michigan who were fighting about the mask ban. What was so out of curiosity, what was so bad about that? I mean, again,
I have a license to carry and whatever it is. And what they were doing, they were literally standing at the Capitol. And one guy was yelling. So that scene of the guy yelling in the guy's face is actually bad journalism. He was yelling directly past him in the room. There's other footage that shows it. There's other things. It was by far a very.
You don't find it weird that you have a group of people who are armed on government grounds?
That's actually, so that was part of what they were doing. That's the Constitution. They had the right to carry there. They had the right to be in that place. And when they were told to leave, they actually left within a couple minutes of when things actually started escalating. They were exercising their freedom of speech and their Second Amendment rights based on state law in that area. They were actually doing what a protest should be doing.
I feel like that's also misconstrued what people think the Second Amendment is. It's actually the right to a well-regulated militia. It's not for every Tom, Dick, or Harry to have a gun.
Well, the state laws allow what they were doing to be legal. So sure. they were exercising that. They were speaking their mind on that. I don't think anybody got shot. It's not that I don't think nobody did. Nobody got.
I'm not against guns at all. There are probably a decent amount of people who shouldn't own them.
Yeah, I get you. But no, there was nothing, but nothing escalated in those. When they were told to leave, they left. They proved their point, or they said their point. They spoke their piece. They did their American duty, and then they somehow are comparing that to people burning down buildings. They're not the same.
Yeah. Which buildings are we talking about again?
What do you mean in terms of the burning down?
Yeah.
I mean, Minnesota had several buildings that were on fire. You can see the overhead look of them, including the police, the 13th precinct. You can look at Kenosha, where I had friends that were calling me from their homes, talking about they literally grabbed a guy that was ex-military that had a gun on him and protected the front of their house. There was Molotov cocktails there. There was literally news crews that were pretending like nothing happened while there was burning buildings in the backyard.
Yeah, and then what happened in Kenosha? There was some kid who came from across state lines to shoot and kill somebody.
So that is so false. So false. Kyle Rittenhouse traveled 30 miles away because he answered the call of a local business where the police were outmanned and no longer could help what they needed. Was he acting out? Was he doing something that probably a 17-year-old should not have done? That's debatable.
I don't think you're talking about deputizing, even if your narrative, you talk about deputizing people. I don't think if the police can't handle that, that kind of thing, then they need to retreat.
That is actually part of exactly the Second Amendment that you speak of, a well-organized militia that protects other human beings and other Americans. So he was doing what he thought was right. He broke the law by crossing state lines. He spent the day cleaning up property, repainting graffiti, spent the day fixing windows, spent the night helping with EMTs to provide water for people that had been pepper sprayed. And then when he was protecting a place of work, there was a gentleman that we now have not in mainstream media, but it's been part of the court case and has been part of the proceedings, fired his weapon first into the air while chasing him, to which he then returned fire to that gentleman who was chasing another man with a gun. At that point, he went to go turn himself in. He was running up the street, and people say, well, the cops didn't stop him because he's white. Cops didn't stop him because he had his hands up and he was one of the only people not doing destruction. He did end up turning himself in, and on the way to turn himself in, he got attacked by two people with the skateboard, one of which had one had a skateboard, one had a firearm. He fired back with the person that assaulted him with the skateboard while he was trying to turn himself in to let them know what had happened, turned fire, killed him in close hand-to-hand combat. And then the person that had the firearm, he shot the arm with the firearm. To me, the kid's a great shot. And fact is, we can say that he did some things that are wrong in that, and he's probably at the age of 17 bit off more than he can chew. But from a hindsight, he did everything right. He did everything impressively to protect himself and to protect that store. What he broke the law on was crossing state lines with a firearm. Now, he's being called a murderer by the media because people don't know the full story because they hear the first snippet of kid kills other people. Might I add, two of those people were registered sex offenders. Not that means they should die in that moment, but they're shitty human beings to start. Like one raped like a 13-year-old, I believe, or a 14-year-old. So
I was only laughing because I had never heard that before. And you're right. I mean, it's always interesting the lens of a media narrative that you take in.
And to be clear, I watch CNN all the time. I have to. I watch both. I watch the liberal left. I watch the far left. I watch the wannabe centers. I watch Fox. I watch a plethora to make sure that whenever something dings my radar, I go, all right, I want to learn more about this. And then I have to cross-reference it before I truly speak on it. And the way that the time that I confirm things is when I actually see video evidence of things, as much of the story that I can piece together as humanly possible. And that's why right now this country thinks, a lot of them think that Kyle Rittenhouse is this murderer that should be hung to death at the age of 17, when in all reality, he did so little wrong. And killing people is not necessarily wrong if it's in protection of yourself, your body. These are people that were attacking him in a very rough situation. So yes, I know the story behind Kyle Rittenhouse. I know most stories, to be totally honest.
Like I said, you asked me if I went down to the riots the protests. Wouldn't go down to that because I wouldn't try to put myself in that situation.
Which is smart. You know? And I had we've had some videographers that have come on our shows when it was Cash and I, and we talked to them what was going on the ground, and everything that kind of what you'd been reciting and said about police doing this. Police had been pushed to their core before they had to retaliate. Maybe not right after the George Floyd, like right when shit hit the fan everywhere across the country. It was all hands on deck. Nobody knew what the fuck tactical they could do, what they were planning on doing. LA, they were, trying to get people off the streets. They were burning down cars. They were doing all these different things. New York, same. Minnesota, same. Chicago, same. But for the most part, after that, all the violence that has ensued, these cops have literally been doing everything in their power. And it's Seattle, for example, Portland, all those areas up there. There's actually been video, like videographers, independent videographers that came out there to show how rough the police were, and they go, holy shit, it's completely the opposite. And then they have video of black people telling the Black Lives Matter people that are predominantly white in Seattle and Portland to go the fuck home. You don't speak for us. You don't see that on mainstream media. You have to watch the video that's happening live before it gets edited and destroyed and censored and whatever it might be.
I remember seeing one of the first Black Lives Matter protests, or I believe it was just a walk in Minneapolis. I was working downtown. I want to say this was like 2014, way back when it first started. It was full of a bunch of college hippies. Yeah. White kids from U of M who had nothing better to do on a Friday afternoon than walk from their campus across the river. I fully support the Black Lives Movement. There's a problem in this country with systemic racism. Coming from cops that's been there all along, and like you said, now that we have media and cameras, it's all being recorded, and it's finally coming to light where the stuff they've been talking about for decades upon decades. Hey, some of this stuff is actually happening.
At the scale that our media makes it seem like it is?
Maybe not as much at that scale, but I also was there when Philando Castile was shot. I used to live about a half a mile from where he was shot. When you see that video come out finally, that officer should never had a gun if he's that scared of a guy who has his hands up and told him about a legal gun in the car with his baby in the back seat and his fiance right next to him. If he's so scared and told him to don't move, and about 2.5 seconds later, after he told him don't move, and he fires 7 shots on that guy, 8 shots, yeah. What does that guy have a gun for?
No, I get, there's bad instances all over the place, but again, they're at such a small level, and we're almost done here. But.
Well, you said small. That's the same thing about how many cops that are killed a year. There's
264 this year.
And how many of them were actually shot, or just how many were killed in actual like a murder, and not just? I'm not talking about like a death on like a crash or an accident.
Killed in the line of duty is 264. From my cop friends, I would believe that over 90% of those are killed in shootouts or stabbings.
Okay.
So, and
you might say that this year is probably a much higher tension year than most.
I believe as though last year was in the mid 100s. How many black people were killed unarmed?
How many people are shot and killed by cops a year?
Unarmed. Do you know?
No, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
14 in 2019 and 10 in 2020. And that's out of how many? 29 million people. And we're talking about a few 100,000 cops are having that many.
So when you're saying arms too, how many were guns and how many were knives?
Come again, the people that were killed, the cops.
Yeah, by cops. No,
I don't know.
Oh, sure. Why it matters is a type of training that they should have. You have people in Salt Lake that went through, the cops in Salt Lake that went through extensive retraining about when they have an instance like that where maybe somebody wants to suicide by cop or they have a knife. Their training is now to actually put distance between them. Instead of trying to rush them, tackle them, shoot them, tase them, they tell them back up, like keep your distance. And
what happens when they don't
keep the distance? Well, yeah, and then there's that the escalated response that it might have to get there. But my point is that the cops have set things like warrior training that Mayor Fry, for all of his problems that he has, told the police union and the chief to get rid of years before this happened with George Floyd, and they told him to jog on. So you have a bad training in cops right now. And so how many of those gun deaths that those homicides that were from armed people could have been de-escalated? Or how many times was it?
So you're blaming a dead police officer on themselves?
No, not at all. I'm talking about not the police dying. I'm talking about the police who kill people. Even if they're armed or with a knife or a gun.
Right. So okay. So if somebody's got a gun, so are you talking like 600 people or whatever that died by cop last year, or whatever it might be, because they were armed and they're not included in this?
Right. You can have a metric.
I agree. We should definitely find a way to improve exactly how to do that. I think ultimately a great way to do that would be to stop martyring people that are armed and fighting police officers, because people are fighting back because they think it's all of a sudden the right thing to do, and they're paid out millions of dollars when they die by local jurisdictions, which to me is absolutely fucking mind-boggling. But yes, the training consistently has to get better, and I'm going to circle back to this Sandy's 87 million comments on the side. But when you're talking about learning and getting better at policing and the numbers being that low, the concept behind it, that we are seeing it constantly. And I bring this up because it was explained to me best, and I've said this multiple times now on air, on This Is Us, when Randall, the black son, was talking about, they brought up the situation, and I was like, oh God, here we go. We're going to be blowing this out of proportion again. But he explained it in the perfect way. And it really isn't a black person fault, white person fault. It is the way that we have seen it. It is exhausting. He said he was exhausted, and that's a perfect way to explain it. And I understood it. It resonated with me, because ultimately we look at George Floyd. There was a white guy killed 3 months before in Dallas, Texas, that was autistic, that had his neck pinned down the exact same way. Yep. And he was killed. It never got any news traction. We watched it because somebody found a clip of it and a body camera, 2 months after George Floyd died, and said, what about this? So ultimately, the news will find anything race-related and murder-related, and they will play it over and over and over. And it is exhausting to black people. And I understand that. It's exhausting to anybody that cares. But I can see how a black person could start having I feel like I'm being hunted, because if that's the only thing you see on the media, it feels like white people aren't getting killed either. Now there's cops making huge decisions. So my question now becomes, based on the way cops are treated in person, and this is the question I have for you, based on the way they're treated, who's going to want to be a cop now?
Not many that I know of. I feel like
the people that we're afraid of having as police officers.
If I hadn't done the life choices I've made and direction I've gone, I've actually thought, a lot of people don't want to be a cop right now, and I feel like I actually would want to actually be that change, be that positivity in a city.
I get, and I've thought the same thing, to be totally honest. But at the same time, it's literally a life risk, and it is exhausting. And there's cops that are quitting, and the people that right now, in my mind, that are going to want to sign up are the fuck you people. Are the, what, I've had enough. I'm going to fuck some people up. Like, I'm going to do this job. And I know they do psychological testing to prevent that. But there's such a shortage right now that beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah,
And
you're very right. It's the fuck you people. That's we want
right.
to be
And
right now.
that's the people right now that are like, I'm going to get in there and those are not the ones we want. But because of the rhetoric coming from the other side, and yet people yelling at police officers, demonizing them, talking about all the different things that they need to do different, when ultimately it can be fixed by telling people to not break laws. I think both things need to happen. Both things need to be fixed. As Sandy says, one black person who is killed by police when it did not need to happen is too many. There's 2 O's and 2 there, but we'll let that slide. Regardless, I get it. There is mistakes that will happen. There is 10 times too many. There was 20-something white people last year. It's too many when they're unarmed. But the situation also in those unarmed, we don't know which ones were attacking a police officer, charging them. There's a bunch that were kind of qualified. But regardless, it is too many.
Do you think that they police people in certain communities, in black and brown communities, more than they do in suburban communities? Because you have back in the day in New York, stop and frisk laws. If you stop and frisk a bunch of white kids in high school, you'd find a bunch of drugs as well. So don't you think that the system was kind of predatory towards minority communities?
Absolutely. And I think that there's been huge issues stemming from the crime bill in 1994 and how in all reality, there's huge issues. Now there's certain things in that bill that I do agree with, but there's the blatance of the way that they were arresting petty crimes. Absolutely. They've been maligned in a lot of poor black communities. And yes, they've been criminalized. And what that's done is create the place we are now, but it's not going to get any better. Right. It's not going to get any better by the way that we're handling this situation. Now, you've got the over policing in these areas. At this point in time, the over policing, because of our modern laws and the way things have changed, you can't just be like, black man, come here. Like you have to be very careful. Does it still happen? Yeah, it does, especially in small towns. I understand that. But to the extent it did, no. And at the same time, the criminality in these neighborhoods is high. And if you look at the Chicagos and people go, you're white, you're not allowed to talk about the idea of black on black crime. No, I am. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we're talking about the police maybe getting too rough with people in Chicago, in certain areas, in certain neighborhoods in Chicago. If a cop is going into a neighborhood that's averaging 3 or 4 murders a week, they're going to be on guard. They are humans. They are going to be triggered a little bit quicker on the trigger. They are going to be wanting to protect themselves. At the same time, they are called to those places. Everybody's like, oh, they're just showing up. They are called to those places a lot. People call the police and then they yell at them for being there. I know Chicago cops. I know these stories. I know what they go through. I've seen video that has not been ever aired of cell phone or of body cam footage literally of a guy that got shot 8 times and still stabbed a woman over and over and over, stabbed a police officer because he was hopped up on shit. Like, this is why you don't shoot once. Like, I've seen reasons of all these different things. And the way that we go about it, which stems from my post of, can anybody understand where I'm coming from? And it does sound like you do, and a couple people did, but for the most part, it was get over it. And I don't think that's not making me go, you know what? Yeah, let's unite under a president that I don't really like, and let's unite because I'm being told that, yeah, but you liked a racist, you liked a white.
For me, it was just like the post just completely sounded hypocritical. Like each side does the same thing, so it wasn't like all of a sudden we got to do this. I feel like the Republican Party has been a bunch of obstructionists for the last 8 years, so they're all the ones that now trying to play the victim. Like, no, we got to work together. Well, you guys did this for 4 years. Well, yeah, you guys did the same thing for 8 years before that.
So I was an Obama voter and supporter, and you actually said this earlier, and I wanted to come back. You're like, Obama dealt with the same thing of not my president. He didn't. I was on that side. I was on the Obama side. There was the few news articles of like people hanging him and the Nazis and whatever. There was like 5. I remember seeing like 6 of like the hateful college kid here and the racists in Mississippi here and like whatever that was. As the most part, there was a lot of currently conservatives that were Democrats there that cried when we had our first black president, that were overjoyed that we have made changes in this country. And there was, of course, people that opposed it. Absolutely. Like, racism doesn't just go away, but at the same time, their voice was not being heard. The racists in this country were in the minority, and the ones that spoke up were being shamed. Now, speaking up to say you're voting for somebody, you're being shamed. Like, saying what I did in that post should not have should not have triggered people to go, Jesus, you're being divisive. Like, stop. Like, just finally give up and just be who I want you to be. Like, no, that's not
okay. Yeah, and I get that, because like I completely agree with your right to say whatever you said. You know, like I would, like you do with mine. So
can you answer for Sandy? We talked about the lie thing. Talked crap about every race. Do you think that he talked crap about every race? And do you have examples of that?
Who, Trump?
Yeah.
I have examples of media that brought up quotes and things that might be misconstrued now that we're talking about it. But like I know people crossing the border not bringing their best, or MS-13 rapists and things. Like, I think he was specifically talking about them and not Mexicans as a whole, but people took it as such.
Correct.
So I understand that you have to always look through something and sift through it, and don't take a quote at its face value, because a lot of things are taken out of context.
Yeah, and that's honestly one of the biggest things that in my post is like, people think that Trump is this horrible human, and you know what? He might not be a great guy. I don't know, but the actual context, like you said, the all Mexicans are rapists and whatever, the way that they edited the clip and it continuously play that. And Biden even said that during the whatever they're called, debates. He actually said that, and he brought up the good people on both sides comment, which has been completely debunked even by fact checkers. And that stuff just gets a pass. And like Sandy right now probably thinks that Trump is like on camera said the N-word, and like he just hasn't. He's denounced white supremacy.
There's been people who have said he's used the word. But that's again, it's all alleged, there's a lot of people that don't like people and will say whatever the hell they want to make sure that their character is besmirched.
And right now, his actions have spoken very high for the Black community. He's turned out a higher Black vote than ever. Black people have started to actually speak up and say, you know what? This is my dude. I work with a bunch of the people that we do our shows with are conservative Black people that literally think that he might be the best president in history because of what he's done for Black people, empowering them. Historic Black colleges. Obama could have done the same thing, and he didn't do it. He's made all these leaps, and I think the name Platinum Plan that would be a little pandery by naming it the Platinum Plan. I think that's like, we had Bud Light Platinum, which geared itself to a demographic, but you know what? Who fucking cares? Because guess what? The concept behind it was to do good. He's created opportunity zones. People don't like, you can say you do or do not like opportunity zones. You can say that they failed in certain ways. Cool. But the purpose behind them was directly towards Black people. So how is he deemed this huge white supremacist racist when the guy that everybody that is saying that voted for is the creator of the crime bill that in 2016 supported his decision still in 2016 when everybody else had said, we made a mistake. And yet he's never asked, never questioned, and Trump has been, as he thinks, as Sandy thinks, talk shit about every race. I don't get it, Sean. I don't.
Yeah, that's one of those statements that I try to avoid, because she just made a very blanket, broad statement. Talk shit about every race. Even if he did talk shit and it was proven, it probably is one or two, not every. That's a very, extreme comment. Now, I do not like Trump. I think he's a total asshat. But here's the other thing. I never liked him before he was a president or even running for office. I thought he was an asshat 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, that's also my opinion.
I feel you. Well, I planned on 15 minutes, and here we are at an hour 22. I want to thank you and compliment you for taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having me.
Comments you might not like in the box, like do your research and stuff like that. But fact is, I don't care how much research you do at this point. If you're willing to have a conversation with somebody with opposing viewpoints, and I will understand that I know a lot of the points and I know a lot of the facts, and I'm very difficult to have a conversation with. And I know
when I realized I kind of stepped into a little bit more, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get ripped up a little bit.
And I get why people don't want to come on shows that are liberals. At the same time, do it. If you can't, then if you're going to throw yourself, and you didn't throw yourself in the comment box, and you still got beat up a little bit for it. So I applaud you for that. But if you're going to throw your hat in the ring, come on. I want to have a conversation. I want to talk about it. And the thing is, I've yet to be truly stumped by anyone.
Yeah,
and
I will do more research because of this conversation, you know, and you have backed up your side very well, and that makes it makes me think, yeah, I need to go back to the drawing board and kind of sift through the what I've been digesting and realized there's always a narrative, you know, and you always got to be careful about it.
And as an American, you have the freedom to not like somebody. You can dislike Trump. Like, I get it. He says some shit. His Twitter is just often brutal. But at the same time, like, Pence, even though I'm not a huge Pence fan, he said it right. Like, there's facts and there's feelings. You're entitled to your own feelings, but not facts. And when the more people can learn facts, the better that we can be as an educated society, plain and simple. So yeah, so I appreciate you more than you know. I love when we can get on and have these conversations. So I thank you. And if you ever want to come back on and say something like, I've looked this up and we want to discuss, you can come on Truth Will Set You Free and be like, no, Anthony, you were wrong. Like, I found this, and you know, we could talk about it beforehand. We can vet it. And I'll be like, all right, shit, I was wrong. Like, I've learned a lot in the last 2 years. People think like, oh, you're just now a conservative racist and whatever. And it's like, no, like,
yeah, just because you're conservative doesn't mean you're racist. Although there are a lot of, you know, racists who are conservative, doesn't mean, you know, A and B are the same.
A lot of racists that are liberal right now too. I've seen them talk to some of my Black conservative friends. But no, I think that there's like, I learned myself, like, I never understood what mass incarceration was until I challenged myself about 3 years ago. And somebody was like, no.
Private prison system, I mean, that's one of those things that shouldn't be a business, you know, like just like healthcare, just like education. Those three things shouldn't be businesses in my mind.
I get it. No, and I've learned that, like, I didn't get what mass incarceration was. I actually, you know, sometimes much to the chagrin of the audience, like, I've understood the terminology white privilege. Now, if somebody ever calls me privileged, they can go fuck themselves, because my upbringing was very difficult, was difficult financially, you know, disabled father. So privilege doesn't work for me, but now I get it. Like, white privilege is a certain thing in certain levels. Like, I never had to, no matter how poor I was, I never walked into an athlete's foot and everybody looked at me like I was going to steal something. Now, should that completely define anybody's life? No, but I've learned these things over time by listening and by willing to have conversations, by people bringing facts back in, and then me having to challenge my own research. And then that's how we learn as a country. But instead,
that's how we learn. That's how we grow.
Whole bunch of bullshit on Facebook. So thank you for coming on. So let's see. All right. So I think that's it. There is a lot of good comments, especially at the end. So thank you, Sean. Great seeing you. This time I'm not carrying you upstairs drunk. It's been like, what, 15 years since that? Jesus. Now you're an adult, children, and all these different things. Crikey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still do have. All right. Gotta take that top off. But yeah, no, I still have a little bit of hooch here and there, but not like we did back in the college days.
Yeah, I have a tendency to drive people to drink during conversations. Just ask me. If anybody wants to support anything that we do, Patreon is the way that I do things. That's the only way we're doing this. So it's patreon.com/BeTheChangeUSA. I've actually left the merchandise on sale for the weekend. So it's #BeTheChange.com. Go to shop. And if you do Cyber Monday in the coupon code area, boom, you're getting another 20% off. Thank you guys. Thank you, Sean. Share this. Make sure you follow us on the YouTube page as well. Cheers, brother. Thank you for your time, and take it easy.
Take care.